If aliens coming down and interfering with weapon systems and interfering with nuclear launch codes and things along those lines, like if you think about the uptick in alien sightings and activity post Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that would kind of make sense. Like, all right, these fucking dickheads, they've gotten to a point where they can do some really crazy shit and they literally might ruin this whole thing.
They figured out how to light the match.
Like if you...
No, I want to play this because I think this is like one of the areas where Joe Rogan once again demonstrates how much he knows about the subject, but for some reason, something about the subject he doesn't believe in. I'm still trying to understand that, but just to play this real quick.
But there was a zoo where there was this monkey that was in a cage that was screaming, like he was going crazy. It was a small cage, and people were walking around. He's like, "Wah!" And I was like, he's probably going mad.
Sorry, it's the chimpanzee shirt that's getting me.
They're supposed to be in the jungle, in the wild, harvesting food and living with other monkeys. They're not supposed to be alone in a cage where these other weird primates walk by and stare at it, and it just overwhelms all of its defense systems and survival systems. We're willing to do that to things that we know are at least slightly intelligent.
Right.
Like, what would be willing to do weirder, more advanced experiments to primates to create us?
And how do you tell a population, if you do study UFO...
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Jeremy, but yeah, that's part of the point. Is like that's something that I think about all the time. If we can do that to the quote-unquote smartest other land mammals of this planet, then who's to say that other species are not doing this same to us? Now, the reason why I'm saying that I don't quite understand Joe Rogan is if you do conclude that these are smarter individuals that may be acting the same way that we act with the most intelligent species on this planet outside of ourselves, why are you relying on hardcore evidence to prove to yourself that aliens are real when you just made it pretty obvious that hardcore evidence may not even exist, just in the same way that we study certain species without trying to be seen, and we have technologies to be able to do so. Aliens can be doing the same to us. I think we kind of skipped over it earlier, but they had mentioned cattle mutilation, and Joe Rogan asked, well, why cows? And nobody seemed to have an answer. And I think this kind of goes to the answer. Maybe it's because we are willing to kill so many cows on this planet for our own feeding behavior. So for an alien species to try to demonstrate in almost a nefarious type way their capabilities, maybe that's one way of doing so while staying ethically in the gray line, because you're not technically killing something that we ourselves don't already kill. Just an idea.
Like, how do you fucking tell people that? Like, how are people going to react? And the way that it's so compartmentalized, that's been the best proof to me as well. If I've talked to somebody who's worked on a project and they're like, all I saw was a supercapacitor in 1974, and I know this was not something we made. He was told nothing else. He just saw a technology that was more efficient than anything he had ever seen. So the idea that people are funneling this information, whoever is funneling it, and protecting this information, as we see how OSAP and ATIP didn't get special access permission, that's a special type of program. They knew about crash retrieval programs, so they said, we want to compare notes and information with other UFO projects. They were denied access.
Yeah, the door.
This is actually a really interesting point because in talking about the idea of compartmentalizing information, something that Christopher Mellon talked about, back in 2016 when we first published his episode, when we first published about him. Well, this flies on the face to all the skeptics who said, well, ATIP and all these programs, it was only $22 million. The government wasn't taking it serious. Well, maybe because those programs were more of a cover for the more compartmentalized programs that existed regarding UFOs. You think that if they're going to study something that has deeper ramifications than nuclear weapons, that they're just going to leave it under one roof? So then I want to come to a really interesting point about why this information sometimes is not coming out, even from credible individuals, even from individuals who believe in UFOs. Specifically here, they're talking about Stanton Friedman, who was a nuclear physicist who believed in UFOs, but highly doubted Bob Lazar's case. So here it is.
I mean, there was a lot of naysayers back in the day that were quote-unquote UFO experts that had more traditional ideas of how they traveled here, like Stanton Friedman. He had his hot potato theory that they just did it in short bursts, like very fast travel in short bursts that you could tolerate. But if they... And he didn't believe in Bob Lazar, too, but I always felt like there was some weirdness there. Like, UFO guys and researchers are so used to people being full of shit that everyone but them's full of shit.
That's right.
And that's what I felt like with Stanton. When Stanton would discredit Bob's education pass and all these different things, I'd be like, yeah, but I don't know. I don't think you know him. I don't think you talk to him. I don't think you get in the room. I think, like, if you just empty out all your predisposed notions of who the guy is and look at it, what if he's telling the truth? Like, what if he's telling the truth? Does that place actually exist? Area S4, yes. Does he have some weird knowledge of it? Yes. Did he really work at Los Alamos Lab? Yes. Did people who worked there remember him? Yes. Does he know how to navigate the building from the inside? Yes. Was there a fucking article in the newspaper where he built a fucking jet car and it said he was a physicist at Los Alamos Lab? Yes. These things are piling up, Stanton. I wish you were alive. I wish you were alive because he was a really smart guy who was also obsessed with UFOs. But again, these UFO experts all believe that everyone else is full of shit.
I
actually commented about this to somebody, at least my ideas as to why somebody like Stanton Friedman would downright dismiss Bob Lazar. So I was talking to Terrence over here, and he was basically getting angry. Terrence Jones said, "We live in a world today where the world's top military is reporting them as real. So who are the real smart people on Earth? I'm going with the open-minded people that are willing to look at reality instead of pretend those realities don't exist." And I wrote back, yeah, because it's a battle of the ego. Scientists are still emotional animals, and too many rather save their sense of making an impact as opposed to being good scientists, which entails being almost religiously unbiased. What I mean by that is that when you studied for a PhD and took you 10 years to get it, and you're on track to make an impact on the world, and suddenly there's an indication that maybe you might be wrong, psychologically speaking, you're not inclined to investigate that hunch that maybe you're wrong, because that would derail your entire paradigm as a person. Now, the idea that somebody who does not have a college degree but is able to make jet cars, does that in any way challenge Stanton Friedman's own sense of his smartness and all the degrees and all the different things he had to do to become a physicist? And Bob Lazar claims to be a physicist with apparently no record. Just wondering if that could play into the reasons why Stanton Friedman never really believed in Bob Lazar.
I had a 20-year dialogue with Stan Friedman, and I respect the hell out of him because he really plodded away and really plowed the ground on the topic in general and tried to make it respectable. But he had a blind spot about Bob. Yeah. And we had multiple face-to-face conversations and exchanged letters over the years.
Did you ever say, what if he was telling the truth?
Yeah, I have said that to him. And he can't get beyond the college degree stuff.
This is the college degree stuff. He probably has something personal about his own sense of being a physics and maybe leading the charge in the UFOlogy circle. Maybe he thinks he sacrificed a part of what could have been a very successful academic career to follow something that was difficult, like UFOlogy. And then suddenly there's this wacko guy who builds rocket cars, who claims he space engineered alien crafts personally, so he doesn't actually have to research it. He can just say it personally. I could see why that would rub Stanton Friedman the wrong way. And, earlier I was talking about the confounding variable, meaning that when you try to study something that's smarter than you, it's almost impossible because they can essentially affect the very evidence and affect the observation and essentially affect the control experiment. Well, I think Jeremy kind of hinted at this.
There are these intelligent craft and stuff. Can we accept that it is aware of us? That it is aware that we have cell phones, that it is aware that we want to monitor it, and if it's highly advanced, wherever it's from, I don't care if it's fucking aliens or, North Korea, I don't care who it is.
Right.
But if they're that advanced, if this technology, if there's any weight to it, which there is, then we have to know that they are aware of us looking at them and that they can work from a technologically more advanced standpoint, right? I mean, I have to accept that.
Joe Rogan's like, but that's like a linchpin point. That's probably one of the most critical points, because that would reestablish how you forever study UFOlogy. You would realize that when something is smarter than you, relying, meaning that you're only going to use evidence to suggest how you think about the concept of UFOs, that maybe it should not be relied on something that can be affected by them. Maybe we need to trust each other. Maybe we need to start looking at all the different cases, looking at similarities of the cases, maybe do probabilistic statistical models regarding what is the probability in terms of a regular population, what's the probability of somebody talking about this who claims to have alien abductions. There are ways to gather information that doesn't need to be reliant on this hardcore evidence that oftentimes it seems that the little green men who came from different stars, that they seem to be able to affect it. And it's really frustrating. I mean, that is really the right word, because as emotional as we are, we have this very skeptical, very gray matter way of thinking about things, that we want to have evidence. And it's like when something starts playing with you, like the way that they do in Skinwalker Ranch, and then some scientists start talking about demonic possessions. Well, yeah, it's like you're not only affecting evidence, but when you do present evidence, it's done so in a way that actually creates the reverse effect of what you want evidence to do. You want evidence to make you more interested in a subject, not run away because you're worried they're demons or something. So I just want to skip a little bit ahead where they start talking about the propulsion of the system.
Because we now can look at them purely through thermal heat signature compared to just, flying.
But some of them don't display a thermal
right.
heat signature.
Absolutely.
Do some of them do and some of them don't? Do they display different forms of propulsion?
I don't know.
I don't know either, but something that we can talk about is there are UFO patents from the Navy talking about different systems of propulsion. And in those patents, they primarily talk about counter-rotating electromagnetic fields, which is something that Michio Kaku also talked about in his book as to how civilization may initially start understanding the ideas of anti-gravity crafts, like what kind of technologies would they use. He talked about counter-rotating electromagnetic field, and it also shows up in the patents for the Navy. Now, you look at Bob Lazar's case, it's talking about like elements that we don't even know can be stable and that didn't even exist like 5-10 years ago. So obviously these are two different types of energy sources, two different types of propulsion. Now I would venture a guess that the counter-rotating electromagnetic field does not create the same type of effect that you see with a lack of inertia. I obviously could be wrong, but Bob Lazar's description of the flight mechanism is that part of the functionality or part of the reason why they use this element has to do with its atomic weight. That the element is so heavy that the gravity actually interacts with a weak nuclear force in such a manner that there's almost like a cavity of space-time that they're able to amplify. Now, I don't think you can do that with electromagnetic fields, so I would assume that these are different propulsion systems, or at the very least, different stages of technologies when creating anti-gravity crafts.
The other thing that always trips me out is the archetypal alien. When you look at it, it's like if you took cavemen or you go back to chimps and cavemen and then humans, you're seeing this pattern of the heads are getting bigger, the muscles are getting smaller, the body's getting less hairy. Well, if you keep going, what do? You get an even bigger head and muscles that are almost non-existent. These like stick bodies. Yeah. But they still maintain that sort of iconic primate shape. They're kind of primate-like.
This is really interesting. We've talked about this before because Shermer, the skeptic, had made some argument that, if aliens are real, why do they all look like us? Kind of hinting that it might be a figment of our imagination. But, having studied biological psychology, one of the interesting aspects of this field is that there are concepts like convergent evolution. The concept is basically that even though a dolphin might be more genetically similar to a human, they're going to look closer to a shark because of the environment that they live in. So I would assume that any mid-level gravity landmass animal would eventually have to be upright on two legs, because according to evolutionary psychology, the reason why the brain, as I was mentioning earlier, is the most difficult organ to evolve is because of the amount of cardiovascular energy, the amount of blood that it takes to get a brain working, a big brain working. And oftentimes, all that blood can be used, evolutionarily speaking, for other traits that can be beneficial to the species. That's why it requires very unique circumstances for the incentives to be present for the brains to grow as they grew with us. So the most efficient cardiovascular way to stand, that's why there's a progressive increase from going on fours and being upright. So the whole idea that an alien would look like us and has big brains, there is evolutionary basis to thinking that they would have a form of convergent evolution to human beings, to primates, essentially.
Where they walk on two legs, they have two arms, they vary the amount of digits they have on their fingers, they have heads that have predators' eyes because the eyes face forward like ours. Like, are we looking...
Once again, this is just a byproduct of the fact that we're land animals, and so most of our vision has to be lateral. That's why our eyes are laterally based. That's why we have a symmetry so that we can see laterally, and we're not so concerned about big birds coming up above. Now, if we lived in some kind of planet where there would be these giant animals that do attack us from above, it could be that our eyesight would be slightly different. But generally, the threats for human beings are on the horizon. So that's the reason why our eyes are like that.
At what always happens to life. I mean, if life exists the way it exists here, and that it always gets to some point where some really intelligent species starts to manipulate its environment, and then it starts to look like that, where they develop technology, where they don't need brute force anymore, so their bodies slowly but surely shrink and become something that's just not reliant on a muscle strength, but rather on telekinetic ability, the ability to express themselves without words and thoughts. I mean, that's one of the things that Elon said when he was talking about his Neuralink, which is, you know, I mean, if there's a fucking alien on Earth, it's that guy,
yeah,
right?
There you go.
And he's talking about putting some sort of a device into people.
So I just want to differentiate here, because I think Joe Rogan is unintentionally merging two different concepts. You know, so far we talked about the convergent evolution. Now the other theory is that part of the reason why they look like us is this cybernetic reasoning, which is that they've artificially evolved their systems to be more dependent on thoughts, on the brain, and as well as adapting cybernetic technologies to their systems, therefore not needing as big of muscles. So these are two different ideas, two different theories. So I just wanted to mention that real quick.
Skulls where wires will go to different parts of your brain, and you'll be able to greatly improve your ability to access information. It will increase your bandwidth of information substantially, and in his words, you'll be able to talk without using words.
Yep.
Now, when you look at aliens, the iconic alien has this slit for a mouth, very little nose, giant eyes, and an enormous head. Well, if we allow ourselves to become some hybrid or some symbiotic computer cyborg type thing, isn't that what we're gonna look like? Aren't we gonna look? Maybe those things have weird skin because we realize, like, you know, regular skin kind of sucks. It gets zits, you get cancer. You know, it's penetrable. They've already figured out a way to make some sort of a hybrid of spider silk and human skin that would be bulletproof. I mean, this is something that they've done research on in the lab. I mean, whether or not it actually gets to a human body, you know, who knows? But when you look at those things, when you think of that iconic alien shape, it does remind us, or it reminds us of the process of evolution. It looks like what we could be.
Like, it causes a lot of people to wonder if they are time travelers.
Yeah.
That's us.
And that is the third theory. So involved in just in 3 minutes 3 different theories as to why the aliens could look like us: convergent evolution, cybernetics, and of course time traveler. By the way, I've heard about the time traveler idea, and I've heard of it from credible individuals as well. And it's possible that some aliens look like us because they are time travelers, and it's possible that other species just have a general humanoid form because of the theory of convergent evolution. Anyways, so I think we explored plenty of ideas. We're basically at the end of the show, and to be honest, there's one other thing I want to talk about, but I am running out of battery. We're like at 0%. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out.